You have been programmed with a lie. It is the most foundational myth of our culture, the central narrative sold to every ambitious mind, the unquestioned assumption that underpins every story of heroic achievement. The lie is this: that monumental success is the product of a singular, isolated genius. The lone visionary, locked away in a laboratory, a garage, or a corner office, wrestling with a problem until a flash of brilliant insight illuminates the path forward. This is the story of Newton and the apple, of Edison and the light bulb, of Jobs and the iPhone. It is a powerful, seductive, and almost entirely fraudulent narrative. It is a psychological prison, and its walls are built from the bricks of your own ego. Because the truth is that the single greatest obstacle to your success, the most potent and insidious enemy you will ever face, is not a competitor, not a market crash, not a lack of capital. It is the 3 pounds of irrational, biased, and emotionally compromised tissue between your ears. Your own mind, operating in isolation, is a catastrophically flawed instrument. It is an engine of self-deception, a machine that manufactures comforting narratives over brutal truths. It is hardwired with cognitive biases that have been coded into our DNA for 100,000 years to ensure survival on the savannah, not to make rational capital allocation decisions in the 21st century. Confirmation bias, the tendency to see only that which supports our existing beliefs. My-side bias, the inability to fairly represent, let alone accept, an opposing argument. The Dunning-Kruger effect, the phenomenon where a small amount of knowledge creates the illusion of expertise. Action bias, the compulsive need to do something, even when inaction is the strategically superior choice. These are not personality flaws you can simply will away. They are the default settings of the human brain. And thinking alone, relying on the heroic myth of the solitary genius, is like trying to perform neurosurgery on yourself. You are fundamentally blind to your own fatal errors. Warren Buffett, the architect of a $90 billion fortune, understood this with a clarity that borders on the terrifying. He did not build his empire through the sheer force of his individual intellect. He built it by declaring war on the very concept of the lone genius. He recognized that the only way to achieve a state of sustained, high-stakes rationality was to build a system outside of himself, a system designed to systematically hunt down and destroy his own worst ideas. His partnership with Charlie Munger is not a business relationship. It is not a friendship. It is a deliberately engineered cognitive machine, a living, breathing, two-mind operating system designed for one primary purpose: to annihilate the individual ego and short-circuit the brain's default programming for irrationality. This is not a story about the power of collaboration. It is a deep, forensic deconstruction of the psychological architecture of the most successful decision-making machine in modern history. We will dissect the 3 foundational pillars of this system. First, the architecture of brutal objectivity, the set of ruthlessly enforced protocols they use to stress-test ideas to the breaking point. Second, the ego annihilation engine, the psychological mechanics that allow them to depersonalize failure and make discarding bad ideas a painless, mechanical process. And third, the cognitive latticework integrator, the protocol that allows them to fuse disparate mental models from multiple disciplines into a single, cohesive, and devastatingly effective worldview. Prepare to uninstall the myth that has been holding you back. Prepare to deconstruct the operating system that made Warren Buffett a titan, not because of his own genius, but because he built a machine to save him from it. This is the blueprint for the two-mind operating system. The first pillar, the foundational bedrock upon which the entire Buffett-Munger cognitive machine is built, is what can only be described as the architecture of brutal objectivity. This is not a casual brainstorming session. It is not a polite exchange of ideas. It is a highly structured, almost ritualized process of intellectual combat, a gladiatorial arena where ideas are sent to fight to the death, and only the most robust, the most unkillable, are allowed to survive. The average, ambitious individual, the lone genius, treats their own ideas like precious children. They nurture them, protect them from criticism, and seek out information that confirms their brilliance. This is the path to ruin. Buffett and Munger treat their ideas like suspects in a capital crime. They are presumed guilty of being flawed, foolish, and based on false premises, until a mountain of disconfirming evidence proves them innocent. Their system is built on a set of core protocols, the first and most important of which is the inversion mandate. Every single major decision they approach is not first analyzed from the perspective of potential success, but from the perspective of absolute catastrophic failure. Before they ever ask, "How can we make this work?" they spend the vast majority of their intellectual energy on a single brutal question: how can we kill this idea? This is not simple risk management. It is a complete inversion of the normal creative and strategic process. Munger, in particular, is the grandmaster of this protocol. His famous mantra, "All I want to know is where I'm going to die, so I'll never go there," is the operating principle of their entire partnership. Let us imagine, with a high degree of fidelity based on their known thinking, how this process would have played out in a real-world scenario. The acquisition of See's Candies in 1972. A young Warren Buffett, still largely a disciple of his mentor Ben Graham's cigar butt investing, finds a company. The numbers are good, but the price is high. He brings it to Munger. The typical executive, the lone genius, would begin by building the bull case. They would create a presentation filled with growth charts, market projections, and synergy opportunities. The presentation would be a sales pitch, an exercise in persuasion designed to convince others of a conclusion they have already reached. This is not what happens in the Buffett-Munger system. The conversation, as we can reconstruct it, would begin with Buffett presenting the basic facts, and then Munger would immediately activate the inversion mandate. Warren. He would begin, his tone not one of creative exploration but of forensic examination. Forget for a moment that this is a charming little candy company. Forget the taste of the lollipops. Let's assume, for the sake of this exercise, that buying this business will be the single stupidest decision of our careers. Let's assume it leads to ruin. Now, work backward. What would have to be true for that to happen? Let's list every single possible failure point. Let's kill it. And so, the process would begin. It would be a relentless, systematic autopsy of an idea that was still alive. Munger might start with the brand. The brand is the only thing here, Warren. The tangible assets are negligible, so how do we kill the brand? 1. A food poisoning scandal. A single bad batch of chocolates in 3 major cities during the Christmas rush. What's the protocol for quality control? How centralized is it? How vulnerable? 2. A shift in consumer tastes. The world suddenly decides sugar is poison. The Atkins diet disappears early. How much pricing power do they really have if their core product becomes socially unacceptable? 3. A brilliant new competitor enters the market with a better product at a lower price, backed by massive advertising. They open stores right next to every See's, selling a luxury chocolate experience for the same price. Does the See's brand loyalty survive that? Let's stress test it. Buffett, instead of defending his idea, is forced by the protocol to join in the attack. He becomes Munger's co-prosecutor. You're right, Charlie, let's talk about pricing power. The entire thesis rests on the idea that we can raise prices consistently without losing volume. What breaks that? A major recession. Let's model out a 1973-style oil shock. Unemployment hits 9%. Inflation is at 12%. Do people still pay a premium for boxed chocolates when they can't afford gasoline? Or do they trade down to Hershey's? The affordable luxury argument is strong, but what's the breaking point? How do we find it? This conversation, which in a normal corporate setting would last 30 minutes before moving on to the synergies slide, would last for hours, perhaps days in their world. They would continue to dissect every possible failure point. The management. The current CEO is brilliant, but he's 80 years old. What happens when he dies? Is there a succession plan, or does the magic die with him? Let's assume his replacement is a complete moron who cheapens the ingredients to cut costs. How quickly does that destroy a century of goodwill? The supply chain. They rely on a few key suppliers for high-quality nuts and chocolate. What if there's a drought in California or a political crisis in West Africa? How insulated is their supply chain? Do they have alternative suppliers locked in, or are they vulnerable to a price shock that could destroy their margins overnight? This is the inversion mandate in action. It is a grueling, pessimistic, and deeply uncomfortable process. It forces the ego out of the room. It is no longer Warren's idea versus Charlie's skepticism. It becomes an objective, impersonal search for every landmine hidden in the field. Only after they have exhaustively mapped every single path to ruin, and only if they still cannot find a plausible way to kill the idea, do they then, and only then, permit themselves to ask, what's the upside? This single protocol is responsible for filtering out 99% of the opportunities that cross their desk. It is the primary reason for their famous inactivity. While the rest of the world is chasing the next hot idea, Buffett and Munger are quietly, methodically, trying to murder it. The second protocol within the architecture of brutal objectivity is the no-called strikes principle. In baseball, if a batter doesn't swing at a pitch that crosses the plate in the strike zone, the umpire calls a strike. After 3 strikes, the batter is out. This rule creates pressure. It forces action. In the world of investing, as Buffett famously stated, there are no called strikes. You can stand at the plate and watch thousands of pitches go by, market fluctuations, hot IPOs, new technologies, and you are never forced to swing. You can wait and wait and wait for the one perfect, slow, fat pitch right down the middle of the plate. A single mind finds this principle almost impossible to implement. The lone genius is plagued by action bias. They feel the need to be busy, to be seen as decisive. The pressure from investors, from the media, from their own ego, to do something, is immense. Watching opportunities go by feels like failing. The two-mind operating system acts as a powerful brake on this self-destructive instinct. The partnership itself creates an environment where patience is the default setting. Imagine Buffett in the late 1990s, during the height of the dot-com bubble. He's sitting in his office in Omaha. Every day, the news is filled with stories of 20-something tech billionaires. He's being called a dinosaur, a relic who doesn't get it. The pressure on a single individual in that situation is almost unbearable. The fear of missing out, the professional embarrassment, the self-doubt, it's a toxic psychological cocktail. The lone genius would almost certainly crack. They would dip their toe in the water, make a few small tech investments just to stay in the game. They would rationalize it as learning or diversifying. Now, introduce the second mind. Buffett feels that pressure. He picks up the phone and calls Munger. "Charlie," he might say, "everyone is making a fortune. Are we being fools? Are we missing the biggest economic transformation of our lifetimes?" Munger's role in the system is to be the calm, unwavering voice of their shared principles. He would not engage in a debate about the merits of pets.com. He would simply reinforce the protocol. "Warren, is this a pitch we can understand? Is it in our circle of competence? Can we value these companies with any degree of certainty 5, 10, 20 years from now?" Buffett knows the answer is no. Munger continues, "Then it's not our pitch, let it go by. There will be other pitches. The scoreboard says we are losing right now. But we are not playing their game. There are no called strikes. Let them swing. We will wait." That conversation acts as a powerful psychological release valve. It transforms Buffett's internal struggle into an external affirmation of their shared discipline. The desire for action, which feels like a personal failing when experienced alone, is reframed as a predictable, external pressure that their system is designed to resist. The two of them, together, can withstand the psychological storm in a way that a single individual simply cannot. They create a shared reality where inactivity is not failure but a sign of professional discipline. They give each other permission to do nothing, and in doing so, they protect themselves from the catastrophic errors that were made by almost every other investor during that period. The final protocol in this pillar is the circle of competence firewall. The concept of the circle of competence is well known. Only operate in areas you genuinely, deeply understand. For the lone genius, however, the boundary of this circle is notoriously fuzzy. Ego and self-deception constantly encourage them to expand the circle, to believe they are smarter and more capable than they truly are. The Dunning-Kruger effect is always whispering in their ear, turning a little knowledge into a dangerous illusion of expertise. The two-mind operating system creates a hard, impenetrable firewall around this circle. It requires two independent yes votes for any decision. Buffett may understand the intricacies of the insurance business better than anyone on the planet. Munger may have a deeper grasp of human psychology and its impact on brand loyalty. Their circles overlap, but they are not identical. An idea must fall squarely in the overlapping section to even be considered. Let's imagine a scenario where a complex biotechnology company is presented to them. Buffett, intrigued by the financial potential, might spend a week studying it. He might start to feel like he understands it. He sees the massive potential market, the patent protection, the seemingly brilliant science. His ego starts to tell him he can get his mind around this. He's Warren Buffett, after all. He then brings the idea to Munger. Munger, whose background is in law and who has a deep-seated skepticism for things he cannot fundamentally understand, acts as the system's firewall. He doesn't even need to debate the specifics of the science, he simply asks the protocol questions. Warren, on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being your understanding of Coca-Cola's business model, where is your understanding of this company's gene sequencing technology? The honest answer, even for Buffett, would have to be a 2 or a 3. And if the lead scientist quits tomorrow and starts a competing company, can you, personally, evaluate the quality of her replacement? Can you read their research papers and distinguish between a breakthrough and a dead end? Again, the answer is a clear no. Munger would then deliver the system's verdict. Then, this is not for us. It's outside the circle. It may well be a fantastic success, but we will not play in a game where we don't understand the rules. End of discussion. This is not a debate. It is the enforcement of a pre-agreed upon rule. Munger's role is not to prove that the biotech company is a bad investment. His role is to prove that it is outside their area of demonstrated competence. He acts as the external objective auditor of Buffett's intellectual honesty. This two-key system, where both minds must independently agree that an idea is within their shared circle, prevents the intellectual overreach and ego-driven exploration that has destroyed so many brilliant, solitary investors. It keeps them tethered to the bedrock of their actual knowledge, not the shifting sands of their perceived intelligence. This, then, is the architecture of brutal objectivity. It is a system of protocols, the inversion mandate, the no-called strikes principle, and the circle of competence firewall, that are designed to be uncomfortable, to slow things down, and to subject every idea to a level of scrutiny that borders on paranoia. It is a system that a single mind, no matter how brilliant, would find almost impossible to sustain. It requires a second, equally intelligent, equally committed mind to enforce the rules, to ask the hard questions, and to provide the psychological ballast necessary to resist the siren song of action, ego, and greed. It is a machine for saying no, and it is the foundational reason for their unparalleled success. The second pillar of the two-mind operating system is perhaps the most psychologically profound and the most difficult to replicate. It is the ego annihilation engine. If the first pillar provides the logical architecture for good decisions, this pillar provides the psychological foundation that makes that architecture possible. The single greatest poison in decision-making is the human ego. Our ego inextricably links our ideas to our sense of self-worth. When an idea we propose is criticized, it doesn't feel like a critique of a disembodied concept. It feels like a personal attack. When we are proven wrong, it triggers a deep, primal sense of shame and intellectual inadequacy. This psychological pain causes us to do profoundly irrational things. We dig in our heels. We marshal arguments to defend a failing position. We engage in motivated reasoning. And we surround ourselves with people who will tell us we are right. The lone genius is uniquely susceptible to this poison. Their entire identity is often built on the idea of being the smart one. To be wrong is to threaten the very core of their self-concept. The Buffett-Munger partnership is not a system of two egos collaborating. It is a system designed to systematically dismantle the influence of ego on the decision-making process. They have engineered a mechanism for depersonalizing ideas, for making failure a data point, not a judgment. The core protocol of this engine is what can be termed the depersonalization of the idea. From the very beginning of their partnership, they established an unwritten but ruthlessly enforced rule. An idea, once spoken, no longer belongs to the person who spoke it. It becomes an independent entity, an object to be placed on the table between them and dissected with cold, impersonal curiosity. This is an incredibly subtle but powerful psychological reframing. Let's return to the See's Candies example. When Munger begins his relentless assault on the idea using the inversion mandate, he is not attacking Warren's idea. He is attacking the See's Candies proposition. His language would be carefully calibrated to support this. He wouldn't say, "Warren, your analysis is flawed." He would say, "This proposition has a potential flaw in its reliance on brand loyalty. Let's examine that flaw." This shift in language is not mere politeness. It is a critical component of the cognitive machine. It creates a psychological space where Buffett is not required to defend his ego. He is invited to join Munger in a mutual, objective examination of a third-party object. His role shifts from defender of the idea to co-examiner of the proposition. This allows him to engage with the criticism without triggering the defensive, emotional parts of his brain. He can even switch sides and help Munger attack the proposition without any sense of personal defeat. This psychological judo is essential. It's what allows the architecture of brutal objectivity to function without destroying their relationship. Imagine the immense freedom this provides. For the average executive, proposing a major initiative is a high-stakes gamble for their reputation. If it fails, their personal brand is tarnished. For Buffett, proposing an idea to Munger has almost no personal downside. If Munger successfully dissects it and reveals a fatal flaw, the result is not shame or embarrassment for Buffett. The result is relief. The system has worked. A potential catastrophe has been averted. The ego is not bruised, it is grateful. They have successfully made being proven wrong a positive, desirable outcome. This is a psychological superpower. This depersonalization is further reinforced by their use of humor, particularly Munger's famously acerbic wit. When Munger says something like, "Well, Warren, I have nothing to add to that, because it's the stupidest damn thing I've ever heard," it is delivered with a twinkle in his eye that signals, "This idea is foolish, but you, my friend, are not." This carefully balanced mixture of brutal honesty and deep, underlying respect is the lubricant for the ego annihilation engine. It allows for a level of intellectual candor that would be impossible in a typical corporate environment, where careers are built on the perception of infallibility. A crucial subroutine within this engine is the my-side bias kill switch. My-side bias, a close cousin of confirmation bias, is the pervasive human tendency to favor information that confirms our pre-existing beliefs or hypotheses, and to be far more critical of information that challenges them. The human brain is not a search engine for truth, it is a search engine for self-validation. A lone genius, having formed a positive opinion about an investment, will subconsciously seek out articles, research, and opinions that support their conclusion, while dismissing or downplaying contradictory evidence as noise or uninformed. This happens automatically and invisibly. The two-mind operating system functions as a permanent, external kill switch for this bias. Because their roles are implicitly defined, Buffett often as the originator of the investment idea, Munger as the primary skeptic, they are systemically forced to occupy opposite sides of an argument. Munger's default function is to actively search for and articulate the evidence that contradicts Buffett's initial thesis. He is not just passively open to disconfirming evidence, his job is to hunt it down with extreme prejudice. Let's consider their investment in Coca-Cola in 1988. Buffett, after years of observation, becomes convinced that it is a wonderful company. He sees the incredible brand, the global distribution, the simple, unchanging product. His brain, like any human brain, is now primed with my-side bias. He sees Coca-Cola everywhere. He sees the joy it brings people. He reads the annual report and focuses on the soaring profits. Now, he takes this to Munger. Munger's brain, by the design of their system, is primed for the opposite. His mind immediately activates a search for the counter-narrative. "Okay, Warren," he would say, "I see the brand. I see the profits. Now let's talk about the other side. The world is becoming more health-conscious. What is the long-term risk of a global backlash against sugar? We've seen it with tobacco. Is sugary water next? How much of their growth is coming from developing nations with less health awareness? And is that sustainable? What about water rights? They use a tremendous amount of water. What happens in a future of water scarcity? Does that become a major political and financial liability?" Munger is not just playing devil's advocate. He is genuinely attempting to build the most intellectually robust and compelling case against the investment. He is forcing the system to confront the very information that Buffett's my-side bias would naturally filter out. This adversarial process ensures that any final decision is made only after the thesis has survived a full frontal assault from the most compelling counterarguments. The kill switch has been activated. The default setting of the brain has been overridden, and a far more rational, balanced conclusion is reached. The final component of the ego annihilation engine is the humility calibrator. Success is a dangerous drug. For the lone genius, a string of correct decisions can easily lead to hubris, the belief in one's own infallibility. This is often the point where legendary careers go off the rails. The successful individual starts to believe their own press. They stop doing the hard work, and they start making sloppy, ego-driven decisions. The constant, 50-year-long conversation between Buffett and Munger serves as a powerful humility calibration device. They are two of the most successful individuals in history, yet their interactions are famously devoid of self-congratulation. Munger, in particular, acts as a constant check on any potential for intellectual arrogance in Buffett. He has famously said that if Buffett's funeral eulogy says he was a great investor and a great guy but he was a little bit lavish, I will rise from the grave and say it isn't so. This is not just a joke. It is a reflection of the deep-seated ethos of their partnership. They keep each other grounded in reality. When Buffett made one of his biggest mistakes, the acquisition of Dexter Shoe Company, which subsequently went to zero, he didn't hide it or try to spin it. He has talked about it openly for decades as a multi-billion-dollar error. Imagine the conversation with Munger after that became clear. In a normal partnership, there would be blame, resentment, and "I told you so's." In their system, it would be a dispassionate post-mortem. "Charlie, I completely misjudged the threat of foreign competition. It was a durable competitive advantage until it wasn't. I got that one wrong." Munger's response would not be to rub salt in the wound, it would be to help analyze the failure and extract the lesson. Yes, Warren, the key learning here is that the nature of moats in the textile and shoe business is fundamentally different from the moats around a consumer brand. They are more susceptible to technological and labor cost disruption. We need to update our model. The mistake is not a source of shame for Buffett. It is a valuable piece of data that makes their future decision-making engine more robust. Munger's presence ensures that the lesson is learned, and Buffett's own intellectual honesty ensures that the ego doesn't get in the way of that learning. This process of constant calibration, of mutual accountability, and of framing mistakes as learning opportunities rather than personal failures is what has allowed them to operate at the highest level for over half a century. The ego annihilation engine is the silent psychological partner to their analytical rigor. It is the system that ensures their brains remain clear, objective, and unclouded by the emotional and psychological poisons that derail even the most brilliant of solitary minds. It is what allows them to be wrong, to change their minds, and to walk away from bad ideas without ever feeling like they have lost. And in the long game of wealth creation, that is the most powerful advantage of all. The third and final pillar of the two-mind operating system is the cognitive latticework integrator. This is where the system transitions from a defensive mechanism, one that kills bad ideas and annihilates ego, to a powerful offensive weapon for generating unique, world-class insights. If the average person's knowledge is a collection of disconnected facts stored in separate mental silos, Buffett and Munger have built a system to weave those facts into a rich, interconnected tapestry of understanding. The term latticework of mental models, popularized by Munger, is the key. A mental model is a concept or framework from a fundamental academic discipline that helps you understand the world. The big ideas from psychology, physics, biology, mathematics, and history. The lone genius might be a master of one discipline, finance, for example, but they tend to view every problem through that single lens. As the saying goes, to a man with only a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. The Buffett-Munger partnership is a machine for destroying this single-discipline blindness. It is a system for integrating multiple models from multiple disciplines to form a composite, stereoscopic view of reality that is far more accurate and predictive than any single perspective could be. Their system achieves this through several key protocols, the first of which is the multidisciplinary synthesis machine. Buffett is a grandmaster of the world of business and finance. He has an encyclopedic knowledge of balance sheets, income statements, and the specific economic characteristics of thousands of companies. Munger is a polymath, a voracious reader who has deliberately mastered the core concepts of a dozen different fields. He brings the mental models of psychology, evolutionary biology, and physics to the table. Their conversations are a constant process of synthesizing these two worlds. They don't just analyze a company based on its price-to-earnings ratio. They analyze it as a complex adaptive system, subject to the laws of both economics and biology. Let's construct a detailed, plausible scenario of this synthesis in action, using their Coca-Cola investment again. Buffett would have started with the financial and business analysis. He would have laid out the quantitative case, the incredible returns on tangible assets, the consistent earnings growth, the global distribution network that acts as a massive competitive advantage, the sheer scale. He would describe the business model as a kind of royalty on human thirst, a simple, repeatable transaction multiplied billions of times a day. This is a powerful analysis, far beyond what a typical analyst would produce, but it remains largely within the single discipline of finance. Then, Munger would begin the integration process. He would take Buffett's financial framework and start overlaying mental models from other disciplines. First, psychology. Munger would introduce the model of operant conditioning from the work of B.F. Skinner. Warren, he might say, you're looking at this as a beverage company. That's true, but it's not deep enough. Think of it as a neuroscience company. The product is a perfectly engineered delivery system for sugar and caffeine, two psychoactive compounds. The red can, the fizzing sound, the cold temperature. It's a whole series of sensory cues that create a reward loop in the brain. Every time someone drinks a Coke, they get a small, predictable dopamine hit. This isn't just a brand. It's a form of classical and operant conditioning on a global scale. The brand loyalty you see on the balance sheet is, in part, a neurological phenomenon. Suddenly, the concept of the moat deepens. It's not just about advertising slogans. It's about brain chemistry. The durability of the business looks even more certain when viewed through this psychological lens. Next, Munger might overlay a model from biology, the ecosystem. Think about the distribution network not just as a set of assets, but as a biological ecosystem. Coca-Cola doesn't own all the bottlers. It has created a symbiotic relationship. They provide the syrup, the DNA of the system, and the bottlers provide the capital-intensive manufacturing and distribution. It's like a coral reef. Coca-Cola is the coral, creating the structure, and thousands of other businesses, bottlers, retailers, restaurants, live within that structure. It's a self-sustaining, mutually beneficial system that is incredibly difficult for a new competitor to replicate. You can't just build a new reef overnight. This biological model provides a completely different way of understanding the company's competitive advantage. It's not just a big company, it's a dominant species in a global commercial ecosystem. Finally, Munger might bring in a model from physics, the concept of autocatalysis. An autocatalytic reaction is one where the product of the reaction is also a catalyst for that same reaction, creating a powerful, self-reinforcing feedback loop. Warren, the business model is autocatalytic. The more Coke they sell, the more money they have for advertising. The more they advertise, the more brand presence they have. The more brand presence they have, the more shelf space they command in stores. The more shelf space they have, the more Coke they sell. It's a positive feedback loop that just runs and runs. The bigger it gets, the faster it wants to get bigger. It's a physical law applied to business. This process of layering model upon model, from finance, psychology, biology, and physics, creates an incredibly rich, robust, and multidimensional understanding of the investment. They are no longer just looking at a company. They are looking at a complex system from 4 different angles simultaneously. The resulting insight is a form of intellectual arbitrage, the ability to see value that is invisible to the single discipline analyst. A key subroutine in this process is the idea arbitrage protocol. This is the active process of taking a model from a completely unrelated domain and applying it to a business problem to unlock a new insight. Munger is the master of this. He famously used the model of the cantilevered bridge from engineering to understand how to properly structure a business. A cantilever adds strength by distributing stress, and Munger applied that to organizational design and financial leverage. Their conversations would be filled with this kind of arbitrage. Imagine them analyzing the insurance industry. Buffett would provide the masterclass on the financial mechanics, the concept of float, underwriting discipline, reserving. Then Munger might say, "Warren, think about this through the lens of thermodynamics." The second law of thermodynamics states that in a closed system, entropy or disorder always increases. Most industries over time tend toward chaos and undifferentiated competition. Margins get competed away. But the insurance industry, when run properly, can be an anti-entropic machine. By maintaining extreme underwriting discipline, by only taking on risks you understand and pricing them properly, you are fighting against the natural tendency toward disorder. You are creating a pocket of rationality in a world of probabilistic chaos. Geico is not just an insurance company, it's a machine for reversing entropy. This is not just a clever analogy. It's a deep insight into the fundamental nature of the business. It reframes the job of an insurance executive from selling policies to combating the physical laws of the universe. This kind of deep multidisciplinary thinking is what allows them to make decisions with a level of conviction that others cannot comprehend. They are not just betting on a financial projection, they are betting on a fundamental law of psychology or physics as it applies to a business. The final element of the cognitive latticework integrator is the memory reinforcement loop. Knowledge that is not used fades. The lone genius reads a book, has a fleeting insight, and then, a month later, the idea is gone, buried under an avalanche of new information. The constant, 50-year conversation between Buffett and Munger is the ultimate system for preventing this cognitive atrophy. It acts as an organic, real-world version of spaced repetition and active recall, 2 of the most powerful, scientifically proven methods for building durable memory. When Munger reads about a cognitive bias like incentive-caused bias, he doesn't just file it away. He brings it up in his next conversation with Buffett, likely in the context of a real-world problem they are analyzing. "Warren, we are looking at this company's executive compensation plan. We have to assume the CEO is not a bad person, but he is going to do what he is paid to do. As the model of incentive-caused bias tells us, show me the incentive and I will show you the outcome. His bonus is tied to short-term earnings growth. Therefore, we have to assume he will do everything in his power to maximize short-term earnings, even if it harms the long-term health of the business. Let's look for the evidence of that. By constantly applying these models to real-world situations, they are not just remembering them, they are embedding them deeply into their operational thinking. The models become a living part of their shared cognitive toolkit, as readily available as a multiplication table. Their dialogue is a continuous loop. Learn a new model, apply the model to a problem, debate the application, and in doing so, reinforce the memory of the model for both participants. This is why, even in their 90s, their minds remain incredibly sharp. They haven't just accumulated more facts than everyone else. They have spent half a century running a two-person seminar, constantly strengthening the connections in their shared latticework of knowledge. This, then, is the complete architecture of the two-mind operating system. It is a three-pillared machine, an architecture of brutal objectivity to filter out foolishness, an ego annihilation engine to ensure that reason, not emotion, drives the process, and a cognitive latticework integrator to build a uniquely powerful and predictive model of the world. It is a system that recognizes the fundamental flaws of the human mind and builds a structure to counteract them. It is a testament to the profound truth that true genius is not found in the isolated brain of a single individual, but in the disciplined, honest, and rigorous interaction between minds dedicated to a shared search for truth. It is a system for achieving a state of hyper-rationality that is, for the solitary thinker, all but impossible. Now you have the psychological architecture for making hyper-rational decisions. You understand that the greatest enemy is your own ego, your own biases, and that building a system to counteract your solitary mind is the first, most critical step. But once you have this decision-making machine, where do you point it? How do you apply this newfound rationality to the chaotic world of investing? The next step is to completely rewire your perception of the assets themselves. You must stop thinking like you're playing with flickering symbols on a screen and start thinking like a true proprietor, a true owner of a business. The entire financial world, the 24/7 news cycle, the stock tickers, the analyst upgrades and downgrades, is a machine designed to make you a gambler. It's a cognitive prison built to exploit your emotions, to trap you in a cycle of euphoria and panic. It's what we call the ticker symbol lie. Warren Buffett's fortune was not built inside this prison. It was built by demolishing it. He installed a completely different program, a complete psychological rewiring called the proprietor's operating system. This system forces you to analyze a single share of stock with the same brutal, unflinching intensity as if you were buying the entire company with your family's life savings. To understand how to apply your new two-mind rationality to the act of capital allocation itself, you must deconstruct this next foundational mental model. Click the video on your screen now to begin uninstalling the speculator's brain and install the mind of a true capital owner.